Hello and welcome to Creatives on Speed, where we talk to creative thinkers, makers and doers from all walks of life about their work and their lives and their careers. So today I'm very excited to have on the show Ruben Delgado. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Yeah, you did.
Fantastic. Who's a creative strategist among many other things. So explain to us what that is and what else you get up to.
Yeah, so creative strategist who mostly works in the realm of brand, engagement, comms, content, whatever you could silo it out to. But I also really moonlight as a choreographer that deeply informs my strategic practice as is. It was what my education was in, and still kind of what keeps me going today.
So yeah, so sort of day job, sort of I'm guessing working with agencies and
Yeah,
brands and that kind of thing. And sort
yeah.
of what sort of part of your week does the choreography take up?
A fair amount. I mean, like it's split half and half. So I currently freelancing at the moment, but previously I was in and out of agencies, both startups and large ones, as well as got the opportunity to go in-house um, in 2019, which was really kind of awesome to solve like brand, communications, marketing type of things. But I realized over time that a lot of my approach to things was coming from a choreographic lens. Of my running definition of choreography is kind of the process of turning idea into action. That's a very close definition I also have for strategy as well. So whether I need movement to help me decompress or take my ideas for a walk or let them exercise in the studio and give them time to breathe for my day job, awesome. But if not, then I kind of also use choreography to explore different kind of cultural topics and who I am as a person and identity and different things like that.
So yeah, tell me a bit more about that. Tell me about some of the
Yeah.
projects where you've done that.
Yeah, last year in 2019, I went on a kind of year-long movement research project of how do I move in different type of spaces. So I looked at a formal dance space, which is like a black box type of normal traditional dance studio, how my movement is articulated and worked out through there, as well as what does my movement look like in an informal kind of social dance space, like a bar, a nightclub, things like that when that is possible, as well as informal dance spaces, things like gyms or just empty kind of studio space with like mirrors. How is my movement affected there? And I realized like while I was type of like moving, the environment I was in was deeply affected how I moved, whether it was in more of a sensual light or more kind of confident and more this, that, or the other thing. I realized that I took a lot of social cues from the space I was of how I move through that space. It's a
That's
really, really interesting
fascinating.
process, actually, yeah,
Yeah.
to work through both moments that I were going through in my life, with relationships, with career, as well as like my physical environment, like what that looked like. So yeah, it was a lot of findings.
Yeah. So what are the big takeouts? What surprised you most about what you found out?
Um, I'll give one kind of call out that I was. Um, I live down in Soho, and there's a studio by me that was, when you kind of walk in, it's like this really kind of gritty underground, like hyper masculine space that would be like, oh, a seedy gym in New York. It looks like it was cheap at the time, and it was like awesome. They had a mirror. Um, and I realized as I was doing a lot of like contemporary style movement, I started to get really self-conscious, which was weird at like the ripe age of then I was like 26, 27. Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, I have a formal education in this. Like, I can articulate this movement. Like, I'm confident in it. Why in this space I'm feeling this way? Just like, though, also the way the space was set up, it kind of was like this atrium of just this glass box of people just looking in. So you have people like lifting weights and grunting and all this stuff, just kind of like looking at this person doing these really contemporary type of movements, or also like really sensual movements, or sometimes like really raw like hip hop that's like stemmed from like street dancing. And it was just fascinating of the headsets that I found myself getting in, of trying to prove my worth to people that I don't even know or
Yeah.
even care to. And that's never like me as a person. Like if you've asked anyone, that's like, oh, I don't kind of give to ways on people's opinions. So yeah, it was interesting.
So let's take you back a little bit further to when you were growing up.
Yeah.
So obviously, you said trained in choreography and that kind of thing. So when you were little, what were your sort of creative hobbies and pursuits?
Um, So actually, when I was younger, a lot of my creative outlets came from drawing and painting and just like charcoal sketching. I was always kind of an athlete. My parents were really adamant in us kind of always playing sports or things like that. But the way I kind of expressed creativity was mostly kind of through like crafts, drawings, or things like that. I'm actually first generation to Puerto Rican migrant parents. So growing up, when they moved here, they moved to a spot in Brooklyn called like Borinquen, like the Puerto Rican projects. So it wasn't really the hottest neighborhoods. When I was like 5 or 6, we moved out to Long Island, in which my mom would always have like my friends over and stuff like that. And giving that it still wasn't the soundest of neighborhoods, even out east, we would she would always have crafts or always have like things around, and for us to kind of exercise creativity, just because really doesn't want us playing out in the street. So she's like, oh, we'll bring the fun inside. So
Yeah.
My house was always known, like, go to Ruben's house, so you'd probably leave with some sort of craft. But dance didn't actually come on my radar until I was like 16.
So what happened then?
That's when I found it. I was deeply fascinated. It was a very kind of like, oh wow, like this is it. I remember at 16, 16 is also when I came out. So I was just a lot more comfortable with like myself, my sexuality, my identity. And I stumbled on dance through actually step team. Like if you ever seen Stomp the Yard, like clapping and stuff like that, that's actually where I like where Ruben started dancing. So it came on my radar through out of step and this subculture of hip hop called Litefeet movement, like urban
I've
street
heard of
dance.
this.
So that's actually how I got my start. It's a lot of it's gives nods to dance hall and reggae and things like that.
It's like fast footwork type stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of where dance first came on my radar. And after I kind of was poking around a bit more, I was practicing for a talent show at a local studio by me, and the woman there, Stacey Nelson, bless her heart, she really took me under her wing. And she was like, oh, like, do you actually like want to train here, or like this, that, and the other things of exploring different styles. I was like, wait, you can like study this in school and academia and all this other stuff. And from there it was downhill. She ended up training me in all different styles. I ended up going to performing arts high school, studying it in college, making it like my major, as well as auditioning briefly out of undergrad, like doing the whole kind of audition circuit and whatnot. And yeah, that's kind of how Ruben started dancing, was really just through hip hop street dance. And then I ended up falling in love with like contemporary movement, improv, and various of other styles that just shaped me to kind of who I was now.
Yeah. And like, so when you were that age, what was your sort of, did you have any goals at that point that you really wanted to kind of achieve as a dancer?
Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, yes, I had like I am someone who like loves goal setting. So I had like this laundry list of goals, like you will do undergrad here, you will go to a grad program here, you will study this in a doctorate program in London, and all this really ambitious stuff that I realized wasn't really my vision. It was like the vision that I felt I had to fulfill to match what society expected from artists, as well as like coming from that first gen background of Latin parents, of what they wanted. I knew I definitely wanted to go to school to be first in my family to do that. Whether it was for arts or something, my parents were just adamant. They're like, we don't care what you study, just please go to school. Like, just please, like, do, because they were they didn't. So they were like, oh, can you just please? I was like, yeah, of course, like, but I want to study this. So yeah, those, in terms of those goals, like I knew I always wanted to be a creator of movement or someone that created movement, but I realized I can't make movement without understanding the language of what it's like to work and train as a dancer. So that's kind of what set me on that original quest. I was like, oh, I love like dance, but that applause on stage never reached me. It was always the studio time that like I really valued, and the tinkering process that but like no one wakes up one day and is like, oh, I'm a choreographer now. I was like, well, do you know what it's like to train? And they're like, okay, no. So I took it.
It's also that thing with choreography, and I think a lot of creative endeavors is that breaking everything down to the smaller integral parts is such a such a talent to be able to just break it down in the first place, so that then you can build it up with other people to build this amazing sort of whole thing. Is that what really excited you about it?
It really was. It was that beautiful process of just the ambiguity of like, you have this idea, you're unsure where it's going to go. It can go many different ways. Let's start to like exercise different thoughters to see what can make of it. And I realized over time, like as I was someone that's like, oh, okay, like now I know what it's like to make movement. Like I can start to label myself like movement director or whatever hat one wears of how they identify. Um, I realized over time my visions got a lot bigger of like the way I like to exercise ideas and explore them and different type of things. And at the time I was trying to work on branding myself, and like I also got my in a really unconventional way into the marketing ad land of their startup, and poking around different agency channels there because they were trying to do some agency work of what strategy is and things like that. And I realized the same type of excitement and joy and like brain firing that happens like when I'm at the studio would replicate a lot like when I would try to like do a pitch deck or work through some strategy with teams and that creative facilitation. And from there I started to kind of like identify like what kind of choreography was and develop more of an articulation and a practice for it. And I realized a lot of the definitions and the terms and the approach I was using was very similar to what I was doing as a strategist.
That's fascinating, because most people watching would be like, how do the two things relate? That just seems bananas. But actually, when you break it down, it's like these are processes, it's problem solving, it's piecing things together, it's finding out what the component parts are. It's like, there's a
Yeah,
lot of similarities.
it really is. And like a lot of these definitions, and I was trained a lot in what's called Foresight Technique. It's born out of this choreographer, William Forsythe, who I like shaped a lot of like my views on like life, art, and things like that. And a lot of some people call him a deconstructionist, but I just call him like a very facile-minded person. He first brought up the notion of what choreographic objects are and start to divorce the definition of choreography from the human body, of how we can start to apply principles of choreography to let them live in objects and things like that. Because oftentimes it's hard to get funding for dance because it's ephemeral. It's one of the few art forms that is kind of dependent on another medium to carry itself on. Right? Investigations like things like literature, furniture, music scores, sculptures, they all carry ideas of their investigation, as though choreography never really had those objects to explore what it's known. It does know quite a lot when you look further of like time, space, organization, pattern emergence. You can even flip some things on its head to look at behavioral and leadership skills, and so on and so forth. So hearing those definitions that he was working with and how they resonate with me and how I was applying those definitions to my work was again the same kind of correlation of like, oh, this is actually very much strategic practice and like a strategic and right. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I mean, like whether you're working on a sort of creative strategy project, or whether you're working on a choreography project, what are the sort of tools and techniques that you go to from each of your experiences, that when you're trying to sort of break down a problem?
Yeah. I kind of have a pseudo hummingbird effect for both of how I'm going to solve like a movement articulated problem, or like, and I don't want to say an intellectually articulated problem, but like a strategic type of problem.
Yeah.
But one thing's kind of always certain for all of them. I like to understand the problem very deeply, of like get all the research. I never like my responses to come from like really off the cuff or like a what if. I like them be rooted in some sort of like digestion of it. So kind of understanding the problem fully, the context and the landscape of the situation, as well as various other streams of information and inspiration. From there, I kind of like to sit with it for whatever amount of time I'm allowed to, whether that's a minute, an hour, a week, a month, whatever have you. And then start to kind of let the creative process, or like the regular creative process of like what creativity needs, of like giving it that space to let the ideas bounce around, new information come in, climb with existing ones to make newer ideas and things like that, until I can finally land on some sort of solution to give towards a team or to dancers, to see how they react to it and what they're doing with it, and how we can co-create this solution or a dance piece.
Yeah.
Even like when I make dance pieces, like I kind of start that same kind of information process, develop a movement vocabulary for it. Then I kind of like to set it on dancers to use it as a fabric for a piece, let them get comfortable in their bodies. And then I take this like kind of third wall, fourth wall type of approach, where I'm just kind of observing them of how they're dissecting the movement and what prompts can I give them to help articulate it more, less, deconstruct it, and things like that. So very much that similar approach of just like, let's co-create this in tandem. Like, let's work towards a single solution.
Just on a sort of like this, the sort of non-specific technical sort of experience stuff, I think that, you know, what you've represented and shown there is that you've got a huge amount of self-awareness, in terms of you need a lot of self-awareness as a choreographer to understand yourself and how you relate to the dancers and all this sort of thing, but also the self-awareness of knowing that you are happy in both these spaces, you know, you're both in choreography and in strategy. And some people sometimes find that they sort of have to force themselves into one thing. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's, I just want to say, like, for me, I do have a lot of hats as well, and it's kind of okay to do these different things. How do you feel about that?
If you'd asked me at the start of my career, maybe like 6 years ago, I would have felt deeply subconscious. I would have been like trying to like announce every way why like choreography is so good, or like, oh, this is what I needed, and almost like downplay my skills of what I learned in as like a dancer and as a choreographer and as a creative, just to meet this typical mold of what marketing and ad want from a strategist and things like that. And it wasn't until probably about like 2 years ago, maybe like three, I started to get comfortable with myself articulating of like, no, I'm very much still an artist. I'm still a creative. Like, doesn't mean I abandoned my duties as a strategist, and let me actually articulate how they're one and the same. So coming with that same self-awareness of just like, this is who I am, this is what I've informed. And it's really funny that a lot of people, they mine for creativity in the places that it's not really for, like marketing and ad. Like when I was an undergrad and was just like, oh, like, why, like how are you studying creativity, or like what is it, things like that, where you have like other creatives in the arts and in certain arts of, we're literally studying creativity on white, like producing white papers in an academic setting, like picking it
Yeah.
apart. Like it's born from that innate from ability to do things, not in like a corporate type of suit world, which is like, okay, cool, like if you want it, then like by all means, like let's talk about this. But I guess to kind of answer the question how I identify of like those like different hats is just be able to talk about it clearly. Like now, if anyone asks me, and also this comes from a certain point in like my career, where if someone asks me like, oh, you study dance, how does it, do you feel like it's a hindrance? I was like, okay, first of all, it's never a hindrance. That's like saying like every artist should then become this. Like I think there's actually an ad in or like a UK based ad that kind of depicted a ballerina of just like, she's an artist now, but she could be,
Yeah.
and it got like everyone really riled up. I know it got me riled up. I was just like,
Yeah,
I
it's
hated
like
that
she's going to go and
language.
work in, Fatima's going to go and work in cyber.
Yes,
It's
yes,
like,
she's gonna go work
not
in
only
cyber.
not only is it such a weird term, a way to describe tech. I mean, it's just hilarious. But yeah, it's like
So
that she's
weird.
got to give
Yeah,
it all up now.
I know, and it's like and there's also when I went back to my high school for that performing arts high school, and there was like a panel of like this dancer who transitioned from being a performer to now working in arts advocacy because she was really passionate about that. One kid kind of stood up and said, when did you feel like your dream kind of died? And I don't think they meant it in a very pointed way, or anything. I think they were just generally curious of like
Yeah,
performance, things like that. And she's like, I don't think my dream ever died. It just got a lot bigger. Like I
yeah,
realized over time that like the skills that I had are not solely one-sided. And it's ironic as like dancers, and they're always told to be versatile, learn every style, be adaptable and things like that. But when it comes to other skills of like what else do we know, what else can we be applied to and be equally as like up for strong candidacy for, they tend to like freeze up, or like things that's like, oh, like throughout their heads, like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I'm huge on cross identifying skills, where it's like, hey, like especially now in times like these, I don't want artists or things to think they need to pivot completely and all these other little fun terms, but just take stock of the skills that you've had and the things that you've learned, and that really Marie Kondo spark joy on what else can be applied to, because like artists, we know a lot.
yeah. And also just like kind of thinking about it the other way as well. If you don't consider yourself a creative or working in the creative industries or doing creative things, you know, there's so many transferable skills from other careers that, you know, when you're an artist, when you're a musician, you know, you've got to know about marketing, you've got to know about resilience, you've got to know about project management, you know, all
Yeah,
these things that if you are doing any of those things now are going to be added benefits to you if you decide to pursue a creative career. So I think
yeah,
everything you learn is useful. So tell us about any projects you're working on at the moment that you can share with us, or you got coming up.
yeah. I'm kind of working on this like rolling research project that is somewhat an accumulation of all my different ideas and things that we talked about, of how can dance be used as more of an ethnographic research tool. I realized that a lot of other mediums like kind of are relied on, or not relied on, they can be looked into for like a qualitative research lens with like what type, like nonfiction, what they just did with examining Americans' playlist of how they're tapping into emotional realism and all these different things. I was like, how can we start to level up or ladder up dance to be used in that like qualitative research lens? Because like we're saying, one of the biggest things that it does, it understands a lot as culture, is like when you have to perform an improv space and now you walk into a space, now you have to make a piece of 5, 2 minutes, 10 minutes long, you're taking oftentimes inspiration from your surroundings or your physical environment. So like, I'm not just interested in the color of your couch, but also the journey that your couch has been to, the pieces that it's got there, what it's understood, and what's its story that it wants to go through. So it's that kind of like intrinsic understanding of culture that I kind of want more vocalized. I don't know if it's even possible or what can be done with it, but I'm having a lot of conversations with people that I like respect in the industry, both in the arts as well as in the agency world, of, hey, how can we make this type of thing? Whether that looks like a framework or a research technique, or maybe just like a theory or something to try, but something that I'm really passionate on trying to like get more out there and figure more on.
That's cool. And you know, in terms of your creative inspirations and things, where are your kind of go-to places or activities or things that you do on a regular basis?
Often culture or like how I'm kind of working through emotions. Early on in my career, I didn't really like to tap into emotions because I had a mentor one time tell me never make pieces of like human emotions or things like that, it becomes too precious or like too much to work with. But I realized the way my approach to work, or movement-based work, can be somewhat abstract, like maybe I don't want my story to be told, but I want it to be seen in some sort of light. So kind of working through how I'm feeling, like how other people are feeling, how general human emotion exists in general, or it's a different choice, or just culture at large and different subcultures.
Ruben, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for sparing the time.
Nice.
All the way over there in Manhattan, and you know, it's really interesting what you're doing, and I love this. I love your energy, and I love your whole sort of attitude to the sort of the mix of the things you do. So thanks very much. And I hope you have a great afternoon.
Yes, have a great evening.
Thank you.